In high school, you meet a lot of strange people. Some are harmless, some are funny, and some stick with you long after you graduate. For me, that person was Patrick. Patrick wasn't his real name, it was just what everyone called him. He was an odd figure, unforgettable in his own way. Every single day, without fail, he wore the same oversized gray hoodie and mirrored sunglasses. It didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, or if we were sitting in a dark classroom, those glasses stayed glued to his face, like a shield between him and the rest of the world. He had this bizarre habit too. Patrick would randomly adopt people. He'd come up to you, put a hand on your shoulder, and say in the most serious tone, "You're safe now. You're under my protection." It sounds silly now, almost laughable, but back then it was unsettling. You didn't know whether to laugh it off or worry about what you had just been protected from. Somehow, Gabby, my best friend, and I ended up on Patrick's short list of adopted ones. I think, looking back, he might have had a crush on both of us. Gabby with her wild red hair and loud laugh, and me, well, I was just there, always hanging around Gabby, always an easy target. But the really strange thing about Patrick wasn't his hoodie, or his weird rituals, or even his awkward attempts at friendship. It was what happened when you said his real name, which, no, I'm not going to repeat here. If you said his real name 3 times, Patrick would appear. Not call you. Not text you. He would appear. It became a kind of dare among the kids at school. Say it 3 times, they chant, half joking, half afraid. We thought it was just a coincidence at first, like maybe he was lurking nearby anyway. But after a few incidents, we weren't so sure. I remember one afternoon vividly. We were lounging near the baseball field, sitting up on the dugout roof, passing around sodas and talking about nothing important. Gabby, being Gabby, decided to test the legend. She smirked, leaned back, and sang his real name into the air, once, twice, 3 times. We laughed. We waited. Nothing. About 5 minutes later, as the sun started to sink low behind the trees, we heard a shuffling sound. I turned my head and there he was, Patrick, standing on top of the dugout next to us, his hoodie drawn up, those sunglasses gleaming. No sound, no warning. Just there. It rattled us, but we brushed it off. Coincidence, we said. Then there was Laura's story. Laura wasn't close with us. She was the kind of girl who always had perfect hair and a dozen admirers at her heels. One night during a sleepover, Gabby dared Laura to say Patrick's name 3 times. Laura, ever the attention seeker, rolled her eyes and did it. Nothing happened immediately. But later that night, after everyone had gone home and Laura was alone, she heard a noise downstairs. When she crept to her staircase to peek, she saw Patrick, inside her house, standing in the living room, staring up at her. Her parents didn't believe her. No signs of forced entry. No damage. Just a front door unlocked and swinging slightly in the breeze. After that, Laura refused to even say the name again. Still, the worst moment, the one that has stayed burned into my mind, happened during a summer storm. Gabby and I were at my house, huddled in the living room. It was late. The rain was hammering the windows so hard it sounded like tiny fists pounding to be let inside. Out of boredom, and maybe a little bit of thrill-seeking, Gabby dared me to call Patrick again. I refused. I knew better. But Gabby didn't. She laughed, grabbed a flashlight, and screamed his real name 3 times into the storm. At first, there was only the howl of the wind and the crackle of thunder. Then, a soft, distinct knock at the window. I froze. Gabby's grin faltered. She whispered, probably just a branch. But when we looked, really looked, there was Patrick, standing in the yard. Drenched. Hood up. Sunglasses still on, even in the dark. Staring at us. We bolted upstairs, locked ourselves in my bedroom, and didn't dare move until morning. When I finally got brave enough to go outside, I found something odd in the backyard. Patrick's hoodie, the one he always wore, was lying there, soaked through. Bundled inside it were a few things that belonged to me, a charm bracelet I had lost weeks ago, a notebook I didn't even realize was missing, and, chillingly, a photo of me and Gabby, taken at some school event. Wrapped neatly. Like a gift. Or an offering. After that night, Patrick disappeared. Just gone. He stopped coming to school. His locker was emptied. No one seemed to know, or care, where he went. It was like he had never been there in the first place. For a long time, I told myself it was all just some elaborate prank. Some weird obsession from a lonely kid who didn't know how to connect to people. Maybe Patrick had been stalking us. Maybe he had some mental health issues that nobody caught in time. Maybe it was both. All I know is, to this day, even years later, whenever a storm hits and the wind rattles my windows, I catch myself glancing outside. Half expecting to see that gray hoodie, those mirrored sunglasses, and the boy who promised I was safe. Because some promises are more terrifying than threats. I've always been a little paranoid. I double lock my doors, I avoid eye contact with strangers, and I never pull over for something suspicious. But sometimes, life has a funny way of testing how tightly you hold onto your instincts. It was a Saturday night in January, and a heavy snowstorm had blanketed everything in thick, blinding white. My friend Mike and I were driving to a dinner party at his cousin's house on the far side of town. The roads were half plowed, the sky was a swirling gray mess, and the air felt thick, heavy, like something bad was waiting just beyond the next turn. We were already running late, slipping and sliding our way down the back roads, when Mike suddenly suggested we make a quick pit stop at a liquor store. "Can't show up empty-handed," he said with a grin. I wasn't thrilled about getting out of the car in that weather, but I didn't argue. We pulled into a small, nearly empty strip mall, and Mike dashed inside while I stayed behind, tapping at my phone and watching the snow swirl in hypnotic circles under the parking lot lights. When Mike came back with a brown paper bag tucked under his arm, we got back on the road, laughing and talking about stupid high school memories. The heater blasted weak, dry air into the cab, and the windshield wipers worked overtime just to give us a sliver of visibility. That's when we saw it. A little ways up the road, half buried in a snowbank, was a car, an old, beat-up sedan, with its hazard lights blinking frantically. Both front doors were wide open, swinging a little in the wind. It looked wrong. Wrong in that way your gut tells you before your brain catches up. Mike immediately slowed down. "Someone might need help," he said. "Maybe," I replied, feeling my skin crawl. "Or maybe it's a setup." Mike shot me a look. "Dude, come on. What if it's some old lady stuck in the snow?" I hesitated. Every bone in my body screamed, "Don't stop," but Mike was stubborn. Before I could say much else, he had thrown the car into park about 20 feet behind the sedan. He pulled on his gloves, gave me a cocky grin, and said, "I'll just check it out real quick." I sat there, heart pounding against my ribs, watching Mike trudge through the snow towards the car. The hazard lights threw sickly orange flashes across the landscape, making everything look warped and twitchy. And then I saw movement. Not Mike. Something else. From behind a snowbank near the passenger side, I caught a glimpse of a figure, figures, shifting low and slow like shadows trying to stay hidden. And then I saw the trunk of the car, cracked open just an inch, enough for another figure to slither inside or out. My throat closed up. Every bad horror story, every cautionary news segment my mother ever forwarded me, rushed back at once. Without thinking, I slammed my palm against the horn, a long, blaring, unmistakable danger signal. Mike snapped his head up immediately, caught the movement himself, and bolted back toward our car. I didn't wait. I threw it into drive and rolled forward, yanking open the passenger door just as Mike dove inside. Before either of us could even slam the door shut, I floored it, fishtailing wildly before gripping the road and speeding away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figures emerge, 4, maybe 5 of them, men in dark coats, running a few feet into the road before giving up and retreating into the storm. The snow swallowed them whole. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. The only sounds were my harsh breathing and the tires struggling against the packed snow. Finally, Mike whispered, "What the hell was that?" "I think we almost got carjacked," I muttered, knuckles white against the steering wheel. Mike leaned back, staring out the window with wide eyes. "They were hiding," he said, voice shaking slightly. "One was in the damn trunk." We made it to his cousin's house, but the dinner party was a blur. I couldn't focus on the food, or the noise, or the laughter. My mind kept replaying that scene over and over, the flickering hazards, the open doors, the shapes in the snow. It wasn't until the next day that we learned the full truth. Mike sent me a link to a local news report. Apparently, there had been a string of carjacking attempts during the storm. Criminals would stage an abandoned vehicle on the side of isolated roads, making it look like someone needed help. Then, when a good Samaritan pulled over, they would ambush them, some hidden behind snowbanks, others hiding inside the car itself. Sometimes, they just stole the car. Sometimes, it was worse. One victim was hospitalized after being beaten. Another had been left stranded without a coat, their car gone, while the snow piled higher around them. Mike and I stared at the screen in horrified silence, both of us knowing just how close we had come. For days afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every time I stopped at a red light or pulled into a parking lot, I scanned for shadows. Every flashing hazard light made my pulse spike. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something deeper. Mistrust, planted like a weed in the pit of my stomach. I think about that night more often than I care to admit. I think about how Mike almost walked straight into a trap. How the only thing that saved us was a gut feeling, a whisper of "this isn't right" loud enough to make me act. I'm not sure what would have happened if I hadn't honked. If Mike hadn't turned back. If we had hesitated even a few seconds longer. Maybe we would have been another footnote in the news. Another cautionary tale. Now, when people tell me I'm too suspicious, too guarded, I just smile politely. Because the truth is, out there in the swirling dark, not everyone is lost or helpless. Sometimes, they're just waiting for you to let your guard down. And I don't intend to ever give them that chance again. When I think back to my childhood summers, the first thing that comes to mind is the sprawling old house on the beach. It wasn't a house, really more like a small mansion. Weather-worn shingles, creaky floors, a wraparound porch with sand always crunching underfoot. It smelled like salt and old wood, and on stormy nights, it felt alive, breathing with every crash of the ocean waves. I spent most of my summers there from the time I was 7 until I was almost 13. It was a place of endless barefoot days and bonfire nights, cousins running wild, and endless stories told by flashlight under the heavy, star-pinned sky. But the summer I turned 10 was different. That was the summer of the nightmares. And the summer I truly bonded with Uncle Joseph. Uncle Joseph wasn't like the other adults in my family. Where my parents were stiff and formal, Joseph was easygoing, quick to laugh, and always made you feel like what you said mattered. He was a psychiatrist, a mind fixer, he used to joke, and the father of my favorite cousin, Brandon. Everyone liked Joseph, but to me, he was something more. He was safe. In a world where adults often seemed too busy or too tired to really listen, Joseph listened. The nightmares started in late June. At first, they were the typical kind, monsters in the closet, shadowy figures reaching from under the bed. But quickly, they escalated into something much darker. I dreamed of being trapped in endless hallways that twisted and changed when I turned my back. I dreamed of drowning in cold, black water while unseen voices whispered my name. Sometimes, I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. The worst part wasn't the terror. It was the feeling that the dreams meant something, like a secret message I wasn't quite able to understand. For a while, I kept it to myself. I was 10, I didn't want the older cousins to think I was a baby. But after one particularly bad night, when I woke up convinced I had actually died in my sleep, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I found Uncle Joseph sitting on the porch early the next morning, sipping coffee and reading a battered paperback. The sun was just coming up, and the beach stretched out in a perfect, misty haze. I must have looked awful because he set his book down right away and asked, "Bad night?" I nodded, throat tight. He patted the seat next to him, and I climbed up, knees pulling against my chest. "Tell me everything," he said simply. And so I did. I told him about the dreams, about the shifting halls, the cold water, the whispering voices. I even told him about the strange feeling that there was something hidden just out of sight, something important I was missing. He listened without interrupting, only occasionally jotting down notes in a small leather-bound notebook he pulled from his pocket. When I finally finished, he closed the notebook and tapped it thoughtfully against his knee. "You know," he said, "our minds are smart. Smarter than we realize. Sometimes they try to tell us things we're not ready to say out loud." I blinked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He smiled gently. "Dreams are like coded letters from the unconscious. And sometimes, if we're brave enough, we can figure out what they're trying to say." I chewed on that for a minute. It sounded cool, but also a little scary. Joseph leaned in closer. His voice dropped, almost conspiratorial. "I think," he said, "these dreams might be about feelings you have toward your parents. Feelings you don't want to admit to yourself." I stared at him, stunned. I loved my parents. They worked hard. They gave me everything I needed. Sure, they were strict. Sure, they never really listened the way Joseph did. But, resentment? I shook my head. "I don't resent them. Maybe not consciously," he said with a smile. "But maybe deep down, there's a part of you that feels unheard. Maybe even a little trapped." I didn't know what to say. The idea made me uncomfortable, like he was suggesting I was a bad kid for feeling something I didn't even realize I felt. Sensing my unease, Joseph ruffled my hair. "It's okay," he said. "Feelings aren't bad. They just are. It's what we do with them that matters." After that, we made it a routine. Every few days, when the nightmares returned, I would find Joseph on the porch or by the fire pit or walking the beach, and I would tell him about the newest dream. Each time, he would listen carefully, scribble notes, and help me pick apart the hidden meanings. Sometimes we came up with wild theories, like maybe the endless hallways were about feeling lost between childhood and adulthood. Other times, we just laughed at how weird dreams could be. Little by little, the nightmares eased. They didn't vanish completely, but they lost their teeth. Even when the dreams were dark, they didn't scare me the same way anymore. I had Uncle Joseph's voice in my head, reminding me that the monsters weren't real, they were just messengers. By the end of the summer, I felt different somehow, a little older, a little braver. On our last night at the beach house, after the cousins had all gone to bed and the fire was burning low, I sat with Joseph one more time. "Thanks," I said awkwardly, kicking at the sand with my toes. "For what?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "For listening. For not making me feel crazy." He smiled, the firelight catching in his eyes. "You're not crazy," he said. "You're human. Never forget that." I didn't realize until years later how much that summer shaped me. It wasn't just the nightmares. It was learning that it was okay to have messy, complicated feelings. That loving someone didn't mean you never got angry or frustrated with them. That trusting someone, truly trusting them, was one of the rarest gifts you could give. Uncle Joseph taught me that. And even now, when I have a bad dream, or when life twists into something strange and hard to understand, I still hear his voice in my head. Dreams are just letters. You just have to be brave enough to read them.